for them, then cough up the money to do it. And then personal financial statement. Those are really nice if you can get a CPA to prepare them, but if you don't want to pay for that, then that's not as important. So going back to collateral, how do we figure out how much that, you want to buy that $4 million building? How do we know it's worth $4 million? Well, we're probably going to order an appraisal. And so a third party comes in, and some person who has an expert in looking at this warehouse type of building that you're buying, they're going to go out and visit your building, and they're going to maybe spend 2 hours there, maybe spend 2 days there, just depending on the scope of the project, and they're going to say, based on my expertise and based on all these other values of buildings in the area, I think it's worth $4 million. So appraisals are something that are big in bank deals. Appraisals on equipment too, so that's things like a, oh shoot, I want to say printing press, but that sounds super old. But we do have a business who actually has something kind of like a printing press. So they can do appraisals on that, they can do appraisals on tractors, they can do appraisals on bottling line, all sorts of stuff, if we're going to take that as collateral. If we're taking cash as collateral, which is awesome if you maybe don't want to put money into the deal yourself, but you say, hey, you can have my CD at Union Bank that has $200,000 on it if the deal goes bad. We can take that as collateral, that's awesome. You'd have to provide a statement that shows that you actually own that. Capital, a lot of people think this means cash. Sometimes it does, not always. Capital, think to your accounting 101 and 102 courses. You've got your income statement that shows how you're doing in the last 12 months, and you've got your balance sheet that's a snapshot in time of, okay, you have your assets. How much of your assets was funded with liabilities? How much was funded with equity? We like to see a lot of it funded with equity. That way, if worse comes to worse, we know that liquidating the company is probably, is going to at least pay us off. Low capital position is a risk because in 2008, 2009, as you well know, the economy kind of tanked. And some businesses who, let's say their revenue went down by 50%, some of those businesses survived because they had so much equity. They didn't have many obligations aside from paying their employees. They didn't have these huge loans on the books that totally kind of screwed them over and caused them to go bankrupt. Other businesses that had a 15% reduction in their revenue in 08, 09 went bankrupt because they're so highly leveraged. They just had an immense amount of debt on their books that if they have a 15% reduction in their revenue, they can't afford to pay the bank. So a lot of capital is good. Also capital just in the project. I mean, if you're buying a $4 million building, are you going to want 80% of that to be funded by the bank, or do you want 50% to be funded by the bank? Obviously, a bank would prefer 50. Cash is king, and that's exactly what this slide is saying. If you get at least 20%, the business owner agrees to pay at least 20%, then it's better. If you can't do 20% of buying a piece of equipment, then probably don't set your hopes on getting bank financing for that. So I talked about assets, and on the other side of the balance sheet is liabilities and equity. How do you increase your equity? Well, we talked at the very beginning about how you can do that. You can get a bunch of money from investors, or just as your business grows over time, equity is going to go up, hopefully, if you're profitable. So retained earnings, that's what that is. It's kind of the profits that you have kept in your business over time. Conditions, this is like economic environment. This is industry environment. One example I'll give you for conditions. We looked at financing some engines for jets for a national airline. And cash flow, or if you go back to capacity, was pretty slim on here. I showed you that DCR 1.22, theirs was 1.05, not too strong. Collateral was pretty good. Those engines really hardly lose value over time, it seems like. Capital, they were pretty highly leveraged. They had a lot of debt on their books. You can imagine being an airline, you probably have to use a lot of debt to buy airplanes. And so the conditions is probably what, at Union Bank, what prevented us from even bringing this to senior lending committee. Sometimes I work on a deal, this one I worked on for like probably 3 weeks, and then we didn't even bring it to our committee because it's like cash flow's tight, capital's not there, and the conditions of the airline industry, they're just not favorable right now. So we felt like we couldn't really get it to fly. RMA data, I will mention this. I think it's something that's important for you guys to utilize maybe in a business plan. Maybe it's not the RMA, but what RMA data is it's like industry benchmarks. So you can say, okay, I'm going to open up a shoe manufacturing facility. You can go into the RMA data and say, of all the people who make shoes, what are their gross margins? And kind of have that be an estimate of what your gross margins are going to be. Or how much for every dollar booked, how much of that becomes profit? Maybe it's 5 cents, and so you're going to say, that's what my target's going to be. Or maybe you're going to say, I'm smarter than all the other shoe manufacturers, so I'm going to say I'm going to bring 10% or 10 cents to the bottom line. So you can use this data in business plans, I feel like. I did a strategy class in my MBA program where we did just that. Didn't use the RMA, but there's plenty of other resources out there that do that exact same thing. They say, here's the industry norms for their financials. SBA financing, I won't really get into details on that. The government has a program where they kind of partner with banks for giving loans to small businesses who probably might not get financing otherwise. They guarantee 50% of it. So if the business fails, the government will pay us for half the loan. Or they take 50% of the loan themselves to reduce our risk. There's Manny and James. Manny's the person who you missed out on today. James is our SBA lender. These are kind of Manny's tips for what makes a successful business owner. She really puts hard work on there, which is totally true. You can also work really hard and have a terrible business idea and not know what the heck you're doing, and you're going to fail. So you definitely need a lot more than that. Know your product, know your people. The one thing that I like on here, and this is totally biased being a financial analyst, but know your financials. And the reason I say that, and your professor said this to me too, it's really important for you to know the story behind what's on your financial statements as a business. If your banker asks you, like, why'd your inventory days go up? It's like Finance 365 type of questions. Why did your receivables stretch? Why did your gross margins contract? If you don't really know what they're talking about, try to educate yourself on what they're talking about. If not, if that's just not your strength, have someone on your team who does know what they're talking about. So have a CPA or an accountant on your team who can answer those questions. Have a CFO. I mean, you can't really afford an $80,000 a year CFO when you're starting with $500,000 of equity. But get to the point where you at least have someone who kind of knows what's going on your team. It's really hard to get bank financing if you can't answer questions about your financials. This is a plug, a very shameless plug for UBT Catalyst. Has anyone heard of that or seen a sign in the Haymarket or in the rail yard? It's kind of just opened up last month to the public. It's like a space where small businesses can go to collaborate. It's like an idea incubator. It's a space where you can reserve a space online, and rather than like writing down this link, you can just Google it. You can reserve the space down there yourself. If you just want to check it out and see what it is, reserve the space for like a half hour. See if, hey, is this something that I could use for maybe one of my classes, or maybe a networking event, or whatever. It's pretty open. There's very few rules. You don't even have to be a Union Bank customer to do this. So that's kind of what it's meant for. And then we have a small business advocate who, if he was here, he would have a much different presentation. If you guys do graduate and decide you want to take off with starting a business of your own, and you just have no clue where to go, and you forgot, I mean, hopefully that's not the case, because hopefully you retain information that you learn in this class. But if you don't, there's a resource out there that you can use who will just say, hey, this is what you need to get in line. These are the financials that you need to get in contact with a good attorney. Here's a list of good attorneys that we know. You need to get your human resources, compliance stuff in line. And that's kind of what this is meant for.
Can you click on that link?
Yeah.
I think there was a little commercial that she showed.
Oh, was there?
Yeah. And they will appreciate this because it's a 30-second little commercial. It was the link for the catalyst.
Yeah, I believe that's what I clicked on, but maybe not. It was this one right here?
Yeah. She clicked on
Maybe it was
the website.
this one? No, that was, I clicked on that one.
It brought up the. Maybe just click on that.
Maybe it was actually embedded in here. It doesn't look like it. Shoot.
It's on your homepage, I think.
My wife works at the bank, and she actually designs part of this website. And so if we can't find it, I'm going to blame her for embarrassing Union Bank in front of all these people.
I know it was on the front page too. There.
Oh, shoot.
Click on it, see if it looks.
Hey, look at that.
What is a catalyst? Well, if you're an entrepreneur or small business, a catalyst accelerates your growth. It's an advisor, a partner, and an advocate. In this way, Union Bank is committed to provide support, financial tools, and advice to help small businesses achieve what is difficult to do alone. Catalyst by Union Bank, helping your business move forward.
So there's a little ad for Catalyst. Again, it's really just meant for people who, if they don't know where to go, they don't know what to do next with their great idea, they can have someone to talk to.
And it was nice to be able to have that, to go on your page and reserve the time.
Yeah.
And the code is what's emailed to you or whatever.
Yep. They'll email, or I think they can text you or something with a code, and that's your passcode to be able to enter into the building, from what I understand. I actually haven't done it myself, but pretty cool. There's Mandy. Two quick things, because your professor asked me to share some advice. When I was in your position, and I think at the time I was a teller or a CSR at Union Bank. This has nothing to do with business lending, by the way. This is totally personal. I kind of